Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is the News Brief. I'm coming to you live, well, not really live, from Warsaw on my way to Amsterdam, which is why the surroundings are quite different. But I couldn't leave you without a news brief because, well, there is a lot happening today, and none of it is good. We're going to be talking about the normalization of America and Russia's relationship and the coveted talks that happened in Istanbul, why they matter, and why it sucks. And of course, we're going to discuss it together in the comments so you don't have to suffer alone and I don't have to suffer alone. So please leave your questions, suggestions, constructive criticism, anything in your mind down below because I read all of it. I enjoy hearing from you, and that way the communication is better. Let's go. So Moscow and the United States started normalization of their relationship talks. And during that normalization of their relationship talks, they actually discussed and exchanged some prisoners of war, or I guess regular prisoners. And this exchange was not equal. And I mean, it was about as bad as that exchange. Remember during the Biden era where um, Russia received back an arms dealer and a person who was a dangerous hitman and was like, regulating arms trade worldwide and stuff like that. I mean, like the under the table arms trade. So that's the person that Russia got in that agreement. And then the United States got back some Russian activists and a journalist. Not that those, the people shouldn't have been exchanged, but obviously it's not an equal exchange. So this one was not equal either. And it was, in my opinion, much worse than the one that happened during the Biden admin. So this prisoner exchange happened in Abu Dhabi, and it was reported about by the Wall Street Journal. Moscow released Ksenia Karelina, a dual Russian-American citizen who had been sentenced to 12 years in prison for treason after donating under $100 to a US-based Ukrainian charity. In return, the US released Artur Petrov, a dual German-Russian citizen arrested in Cyprus in 2023 at Washington's request for exporting sensitive microelectronics. So here's what happened. It's kind of like exchanging 50 cents for $50. Because while, of course, Ksenia should have been exchanged, and she doesn't deserve to be in prison for donating money to a Ukrainian charity. But here's the thing: in the grand scheme, she doesn't matter logistically or in terms of warfare or in terms of like spy relationships or in terms of intelligence or anything like that for the United States. She's just a civilian. Meanwhile, the person that Russia got back is not just a civilian. It's a person that was exporting microelectronics, things that Russia can't import and is sanctioned from importing from the United States. So electronics, microchips and electronics that go into missiles, drones, various warfare equipment that allows Russia to wage war in Ukraine. This person was already in the business. He knows the logistics, he knows the trade routes, he knows how to circumvent sanctions. So we just gave Russia an asset, a very big asset that will help Russia continue its war against Ukraine. Meanwhile, we received a regular civilian. So it's an incredibly unequal exchange. And while the Trump administration is gloating and talking about how fantastic deal makers they are, and Trump is making his cabinet wear Trump gold busts instead of American flags as pins, yeah, that's going around the internet today, and that's not dictatorial at all, not Kim Jong-un type of stuff at all. But I digress. While Trump is gloating about how much of a fantastic deal maker he is and how great they're negotiating with Russia, we're giving Russia assets that help them conduct warfare. And I mean, like, it's expected from the Trump administration, but every single time it happens, it almost like slaps me in the face unexpectedly every single time. Meanwhile, the CIA director, John Radcliffe, was actually personally present in the Abu Dhabi in the exchange where he welcomed Karelina, which that indicates to me that you have put people from the highest American diplomatic branches into this exchange, and they have failed at their job so miserably. Russia arrested this woman for donating to the Ukrainian military, of course, while she was a dual US citizen, specifically to use her as a bargaining chip to blackmail the West or literally any Western country or the United States or Ukraine into a prisoner exchange for someone more valuable. And that is literally what you let Russia do. It boggles my mind that the highest postulated people in the American government are put into these positions of negotiations, and the best they can do is negotiate a regular civilian for a massive war asset and give Russia exactly what it wants. I mean, that's pretty much what has been happening with the Trump admin the entire time anyway. But again, every single time it hits you in the face with the exact same blow. So these talks altogether lasted around 5 hours, and after they were done, basically Russia and the US said that there would be no press conference following the meeting, and that the meeting went really great and really smoothly, of course. And then the Russian ambassador to the US came out and said that basically both delegations agreed to remove irritants inherited from the Biden administration in order to normalize the relationship between the US and Russia. And I'm going to give you a list of these things that they consider irritants and things in general that they're talking about doing. And you can decide for yourself whether you think that this is really negotiations and this is really helping and this is really mutually beneficial, or if this is just normalizing relationships with Russia and the US and letting Russia off scot-free. Because if you were to ask me, it is definitely the latter. So one of the first things is Russia and the US agreed on easing steps for visa processing for diplomats. That's first. But it's really just steps for easing visa processes. Right now, Russia is in the orange zone on the Trump visa restrictions list, and they're trying to improve that. Meanwhile, there is really no need for Russian diplomats to be present in America. You can just have, Zoom conversations or conversations on Signal with this administration anyway, because it's not like they care about operational security. But jokes aside, Russian diplomats really do not need an easing of visa processing or of travel into the US, because Russian diplomats shouldn't be traveling to the US. All of the people that are tied to the Russian government should be absolutely banned from visiting most countries on the planet, the same way as North Korea is, because the same way as, Hitler's administration would have been, because these are terrorists that are conducting acts of terrorism. The second demand, or the second point of discussion on this list, you might think that diplomatic properties like embassies or property that belongs to the Russian government that does some political work. No. These are houses of the Russian diplomats paid for by the Russian government. These are, Russia's cultural centers and all of the places that help them promote and conduct Russian propaganda. These are all of the things that help Russia poison its way into America from within. And quite literally, we've talked about that so much that a lot of the government people from Russia, a lot of the cultural ambassadors from Russia, a lot of people like that, they're all Russian spies, and their direct mission is to destroy the United States from within. And it's so hard to uncover them, and it's so hard to get rid of them. And the Biden administration actually was doing a fantastic job at it as compared to the Trump admin, which is why Russia is irritated by it, because it started getting harder for Russia to influence US operations once all of these measures were put in place. And now, of course, Russia wants these measures to be eliminated, so they wouldn't have to go through the extra effort of sending their spies and diplomats through third-party countries and through giving them random passports. It bothers me so much that we keep falling for this act, that we keep stepping on the same stepping stones. We keep making the same mistakes. It's so irritating. And of course, with the Trump admin, it was expected more than anything. But at the same time, it's still really, really disappointing, and it hurts quite a lot. Anyway, Russia also insisted that resuming direct flights from Moscow to the United States would really ease diplomatic processes and improve people-to-people communication, like in-person communication. Also, Russia wants to ensure that banking services are going to be working for Russian diplomats when they go to the US through these direct flights. So direct flights to the United States from Russia is a problem, even if they're diplomatic, because again, Russia is the best at circumventing sanctions. And on these diplomatic flights, because you can't check diplomatic suitcases, these diplomats can be in New York or wherever. They can be buying tons of things that are forbidden from exporting to Russia, and they could be bringing that to Russia. And no one can check their suitcases because, again, diplomatic suitcases are not allowed to be checked. The second part of this that's really bad is the fact that Russia's banking services, right? Because that means that SWIFT should be working, Russia's bank cards should be working, Russia should be able to move around freely with money once the diplomats are in the United States. And you would think that's reasonable, but again, Russia uses its diplomats and oligarchs in normal scenarios in order to smuggle money, in order to do shady operations, in order to fulfill its criminal goals. So having diplomats being able to freely move around, to take direct flights, to come here in private jets or with diplomatic suitcases, to do all of these things, that's going to give Russia a leg up and ease their way into circumventing sanctions, especially if you also let Russians spend their money freely while they're here on diplomatic missions. Like, it might sound really stupid, but Russians used to take chips, microchips from washing machines in order to insert them into drones and into other technology, right? So for that matter, what they can start doing again is they can buy small electronics, they can buy laptops, they can buy computers, and they can put them in their stupid diplomatic suitcases. They can be taking out a lot of them at one time and using those in order to further Russia's war goals. And I know it sounds quite far-fetched, but that's, you start with a little and then you go a lot. It's like you ease the sanctions a little, you ease their conditions a little, and then it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And then we have Russia that's absolutely not restricted in any way and able to wage war better than before. In the meantime, while, the U.S. contact group is raving about how smoothly and how fantastically and how constructively is the word they used, their meeting with Russia went on normalizing relations. I don't even know why we're having meetings on normalizing relations with Russia in 2025. But anyways, in the meantime, Witkoff went to Russia to meet with Putin yet again. And he basically said that if peace isn't reached by the end of the month, then America might impose a lot more sanctions on Russia. And Russia needs to hurry up. And then Donald Trump doubled down on that statement, saying Russia needs to hurry up and reach peace because thousands of people are dying, I think he said weekly, on the battlefield, which is hilarious because Russians are dying in the thousands because they're sending their people to die in the meat grinder, and they quite literally don't care for the numbers of people that will never come back home. Ukrainians are not dying in the thousands. And I mean, it's Trump. He always says things that are absolutely wrong, and he always exaggerates everything. But it's still incredibly annoying, and it's still incredibly just tiresome, because every time he opens his mouth and it has something to do with Ukraine, it's always less than optimistic. But when he talks about Russia, it's always with such fondness. Even when he scolds Russia, it's with fondness. So it's it's quite disturbing. It's ever so much more disturbing when you see that how much effort the US puts into their relationship with Russia and into their diplomatic ties to Russia and into like the contact groups that they send to Russia. Putin says, "Oh, I don't want this guy to go," and they don't send him, right? Meanwhile, with Ukraine, it's very different because the US does not care who they send to Ukraine, and the US doesn't care who is going to be representing them and what Ukraine wants and what Ukraine doesn't. One of the examples of that is the recent resignation of Bridget Brink, who was the US ambassador to Ukraine.
So then, to my question that maybe you can answer a little bit on is the departure of Ambassador Brink from Kyiv. Do you have anything to say about that?
I do, says Tammy Bruce. Wow, all right. Because we had just discussed this.
Right. Well, we also had discussed something a little bit earlier.
Yes.
The blanket statement that we, the State Department, do not discuss personnel matters.
Well, that is something we've discussed at great length, and in this particular case, Ambassador Brink's been ambassador at the embassy in Ukraine for 3 years, during a time of war for those 3 years, an extraordinary performance there, and we wish her well. At the same time, of course, it's a reminder when it comes to the issues that we think about that surround this conversation, is that we know that we're working for that war to end. And that is our focus. And we expect, of course, our work that will continue in that regard. But that's the nature of what we're focusing on here. And we we wish her well, and that's really all we would say in that regard. Yes, Andrea.
She was appointed in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, I believe, and she was appointed under the Biden administration. We actually really liked her. We thought she was a pretty good ambassador. And recently, when Russia struck Kryvyi Rih, and it was a playground and a lot of kids died there, it was 9 children. Bridget Brink posted on Twitter, I believe, saying that, a missile hit this playground and a lot of kids were deceased, but she never mentioned whose missile. And so Zelensky went ahead and criticized her for not calling it out as it is, which is a Russian missile. And in the past, Bridget Brink has been very good at calling these things out. And in this particular situation, she didn't and she wasn't. And I believe that's because under the new administration, Trump's administration, she was, and this is speculation, so just bear with me, right? Like, do not take my word for it. This is speculative, but I believe that the Trump administration gave her a guideline on how to speak publicly about the war in Ukraine and to not condemn Russia too strongly as to not irritate them, from the Biden administration. And that's what she did. So she likely posted this without any mention or condemnation of Russia. She just condemned the strike from an unknown country. And then Zelensky called her out, and a lot of other people called her out for the fact that, while the U.S. is dancing around and giving Russia everything they want, American diplomats and American people that are here to be helping Ukraine can't even call out whose missile it was that killed 9 children and injured 50 people. So then she came back and she actually took her post back, I guess, and added to it and said that, yes, it was a Russian missile and she's condemning Russia for this strike. And I believe she was asked to leave. I don't think that she resigned just because. I think that clearly she was from the Biden administration. She's not to Trump's liking, right? She's way too reasonable and she's way too actually pro-Ukrainian. And then she likely went against the orders of neutrality and keeping neutrality. And that's most likely the reason why they told her to basically resign, and she did. I also don't think that she particularly likes working under this administration because it's likely difficult for someone who comes from working with reasonable people and with reasonable politicians and with reasonable lawmakers to come to this admin and deal with whatever it is that you're dealing with. Because imagine you've been working as an ambassador to Ukraine and you've been doing all of this work in order to better the relationship between Ukraine and the United States, in order for the United States to act more rapidly, in order for the United States to understand the situation better. And then you land with Trump and his administration that basically talks about how Putin sent Trump a portrait and how great of a guy he is and how much he respects him and how fantastic of a leader he is. Yeah, that type of work burnout and that type of, it's kind of like, if I were in her place, I would probably sit there and be like, how did I end up here? So yeah. Well, Bridget, thank you for everything that you have done for Ukraine, and thank you for serving as our ambassador for at least 3 years. And I hope that whoever comes after her is going to be at least half as decent, because if they're going to be appointed by Trump, then my hope is very low. And while all of this is happening, there is the 27th meeting of the Rammstein contact group about the defense of Ukraine. And I mean, in the next episode, we'll likely talk about what came out of that and what we can expect and what we can see and what we can see change, because the UK opened the address at the Rammstein and Healy had some really strong words to say that is the representative from the UK. And I really do hope that, seeing as Trump is doing these crazy things to the United States and that echo obviously onto Europe, because the US was a self-assigned leader of the free world, I hope that in light of that, Europe is not just thinking about increasing its defense and its self-determination and its ability to sustain itself. I'm hoping that Europe is actively doing that. Well, this is all I have for you for today. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this news brief and would like more news briefs like that, please don't forget to follow this channel, turn on all of your notifications, or send this video to a friend, like it, and leave your comments, questions, suggestions, thoughts, anything in your mind down below, because I would love to have a conversation with you. And also, please do tell me, what would you like me to cover in the news briefs? What do you like that's been happening in the news briefs recently versus what do you dislike? I've been getting some emails from some of you actually telling me what you guys would like me to cover, and I love receiving those. I would just much rather see them in the comments, and I really do appreciate constructive criticism, so please give it to me and tell me everything that you think. I would love to know.